most companies do not have an AI access problem anymore. They have an AI deployment problem. That is the shift that I want to talk about today, because once you see it, a lot of the confusion around AI starts to make sense. For the last couple of years, the default question was, which AI should we try? Should we use ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, Grok? Should we buy the AI inside our CRM? Should we get an AI note taker? Should we build a chatbot or a voice agent? These are all reasonable questions, but they're no longer the best starting point. Most businesses already have access to powerful AI. Your team can go on ChatGPT. They can use Claude. They can probably use Gemini inside the tools they're already using, or Copilot for that matter. They probably have features showing up inside the software they already pay for. Your email tool has an AI. Your project management tool has an AI. Your CRM has an AI. Your document tools have AI. Your meeting tools have AI. Even tools that barely needed AI now have AI, because apparently every single tool setting needs a small AI hiding in the corner. Access is everywhere, but results are not. That's the important part. McKinsey reported that 78% of organizations are using AI in at least one business function, but only 1% describe their generative AI rollouts as mature. That number should get your attention. It means companies are trying AI, people are experimenting, teams are testing tools, leaders are paying attention. But very few companies have turned AI into something mature, repeatable, and trusted inside the business. That gap is where the opportunity is. I'll call it the deployment gap. The deployment gap is that space between what AI can do and what your company has actually put into production. And for small and medium businesses, that gap usually has very little to do with model quality. It usually has to do with workflow. Now, I'll make this concrete. Imagine a lead comes in through your website. On paper, it sounds very simple. Oh, someone fills out a form, the business follows up. Everyone is happy. But that's very, very far from the real life. So in real life, it's a lot messier. The form comes in, someone may or may not get an email. Someone else checks whether the lead is qualified. A CRM record may or may not be created. A salesperson writes a response. Maybe they check the company website first. Maybe they look in their LinkedIn. Maybe they ask the founder if this is a good fit. Or maybe they forget to follow up 3 days later. Maybe the lead goes quiet because the next step depended on someone else remembering. And if you look at this process and say, we need AI, you are skipping steps. The better question is, how does this work actually move? Where does it enter? Who touches it? What information is needed? What decisions repeat? What gets copied from one tool into the other? Where does the delay happen? Where does the trust matter? Where should a human be involved? Only after you do that and answer those questions, maybe you figure out what the real next steps are. So once you have that, you'll start to see that maybe the answer is a simple automation that creates the CRM record and assigns the task. Maybe the answer is AI that summarizes the lead, researches the company, and drafts that first reply. Maybe the answer is a scoring model that routes the leads. Maybe the answer is a reminder sequence. Maybe the answer is training the team to use a better sales follow-up process before you automate anything. Those are very different solutions. And you only get to the right one by understanding the workflow first. This is why I think the AI conversation has to move from tools to deployment. A tool is something you buy. Deployment is something you change. A tool can be just purchased with a credit card. Deployment asks harder questions. Who owns this process? What result are we trying to improve? What does success look like? What data do we trust? What is allowed to happen automatically? What needs approval? How will the team know what changed? How will we measure whether it worked or not? That is less exciting than a demo, but it's also where the money is, because the value of AI does not come from saying our company uses AI. The value, the real value, comes from the process being faster, clearer, cheaper, safer, or easier to manage. And that might mean leads get followed up within 5 minutes instead of 5 hours. It might mean proposals go out in a day instead of a week. It's that not so sexy part of it that actually brings more money into the door and makes the business more efficient. It might mean support tickets get routed correctly the first time. It might mean invoices get reviewed faster. It might mean reports stop consuming someone's Friday afternoon. It might mean the founder is no longer the only person who knows how a decision should be made. That is real business value, and it starts with deployment. One mistake I see a lot is treating AI like a layer you sprinkle on top of the company. The company has a messy process, so someone says, let's add AI. But AI does not magically fix the mess. Sometimes it just makes the mess louder. If your data is inconsistent, AI will struggle and many times fail. If your process is unclear, AI will inherit that confusion. If no one owns the workflow, AI will create a new output that no one feels responsible for. And if your team does not trust the result, they will quietly go back to the old way. And that's how AI projects die, and many of them do. Not with a dramatic failure, usually with a very boring one. People just stop using it. No one updates the prompt, the automation breaks because the field changed, the output is close but not good enough, and the team simply decides it's easier to just do it manually. And then 6 months later, someone asks, oh, what happened with the AI thing? And they'll just say, we tried it, but it doesn't work for us. That's AI thing is not for us. But usually it's not AI that was the real problem. The deployment was the problem. So here's a useful way to think about it. There are 3 phases of AI adoption. The first phase is access. That is where a company gets the tools. People get accounts. They experiment. They try prompts. They use AI for an email brainstorming, summaries, maybe a little research. This phase is easy to start, and you can get your people to start using it. It's very good. It's also easy to overestimate because the activity feels like progress. It's like you start using it, and since you get some results, sometimes good, sometimes bad, but you sort of see some movement. And so you have to start using it, seeing what it's doing for you, but then align it. And that's where the second phase goes. That's the deployment phase, because you can't stay in that little box forever. You have to bring it down to earth to something that's actually going to be useful for the long run in the company. The deployment phase, that's where AI gets attached to a real workflow, a business process change, a team that agrees on how to use it. There's one owner, there are rules, there are review points, there's a before, there's an after. There's tracking of how it was maintained. That's where the companies are stuck. And then we have the third option, which is the operating loops. That's where the system does not just help with the work, it starts to improve the way the work happens. And going back to what we talked about earlier, if you have a messy process, yes, AI can help you make that process less messy, but ideally you make it less messy first so that you start with something that works. Then the improvement help something that's already good become better. So don't think of it as a patch that's going to fix everything for you. It'll help improve what already works well. Keep that in mind. AI can notice when the process breaks, especially if you're using agents, and we'll talk about this in another video. When you're doing agentic processes, then the agent can do something, then understand that something went wrong and fix itself and do something better next time. But it has to have that background structure that we talked about. And this happens because AI can capture patterns, and then it can suggest better rules. It can update that documentation. It turns repeated failures into improvements. That is where the AI starts becoming part of how the company learns. Most small businesses do not need to start with phase 3. And unfortunately, that's what some people try to do. And that's a lot of the reason why they fail. Start with phase 2. Get one workflow deployed well, then build from there. Now, how do you know which workflow to start with? Use 5 filters. First, look for repetition. It's the same kind of work, happens every week, then it's a candidate. Second, look for visible pain. If the team is already complaining about it, that helps. You'll know what they actually want to fix, and they'll be on board to try to help you fix it. Adoption is easier when people actually want the problem solved. Third, look for measurable output. Can you tell whether the workflow got better? Time saved, response time improved, error rate reduced, number of hands-offs changed, number of missed follow-ups. If you cannot measure anything, it will be harder to prove value. This is very important. So start with things that you can measure so you know a before and after, and if it actually helped you improve. Otherwise, you just feel good because it did something. Fourth, you're going to look for manageable risk. Your first AI workflow should not be the riskiest part of your business. Do not begin with something that can create legal, financial, or customer trust problems if it goes wrong. Start where a human can review the output and the cost of a mistake is manageable. Fifth, look for context availability. Does the AI have the information it needs? Are the examples available? Are there rules written down or standard operating procedures? Is the data accessible? Can the team explain what good looks like? If the answer is no, then that does not mean you should abandon the idea. It just means the first step is making the workflow legible. That word matters. Legible. I was just watching a video in the little Y Combinator event that they had, and they were specifically talking about how an AI native company, or all these new companies that they're building, they're now structuring them in a way that the whole company has to be legible for AI. And that means that the AI has to have access to the data points and the references and the rules and the decision-making protocols such that it can then help. Because if you have things that nobody knows except the two people that were on the call, if you don't have recordings of your calls, if you don't have transcripts, if you don't have minutes for the meetings, then the AI doesn't know about them and it can't help. So legible is super important. All the work needs to be visible enough so that it can assist with it. If everything depends on someone's memory, the system has very little to work with. If the process lives in scattered emails, random notes, and ask Sarah, she knows, then the AI will produce generic results. Not because the model is bad, but because the company did not give it the actual company knowledge. So deployment has two parts. You improve the workflow and you make the knowledge around the workflow usable. Let's walk through a few examples. Example one, let's do sales follow-up. A bad AI project says, let's use AI to write sales emails. That is just too vague. A better deployment says, when a new lead comes in, AI will summarize the request, check fit against our criteria, draft a response using our approved examples, like based on your actual company, create the CRM record, and assign a follow-up task. A human will approve the response before it goes out. That is a workflow because it has inputs and it has rules and it has a human review point. There will be a point when you can automate everything, but at the beginning, you do want to have a human review point to make sure that what you're sending out to the world, to your clients or potential leads, then you have a chance to stop it and say, hey, let's adjust this and make it better. That way you have a measurable result. Now, in example two, this is client onboarding. If in a bad AI project, you would say, let's automate onboarding, and you just want a little wizard that helps you do it. Again, that's too vague. A better deployment says, when a signed agreement comes in, the system creates a project, it checks for missing information, it drafts the welcome email, it creates the kickoff checklist, it alerts the account owner if the client has not completed the intake within 2 days. That, again, is very specific. You can build it, you can test it, you can improve it. And it's very similar to what we've done before. Like many of these things have existed. It's just think of a process. It's a business process. Once you have the process, then you can use AI to automate it, whether with node-based workflows or agentic AI or whatever you want to use. There's many options. We've talked about this already. Another example, let's see, weekly reporting. A bad AI project will say, let's make AI make reports. A good deployment will say, every Friday morning, the system pulls numbers from these 3 sources. It highlights changes above a certain threshold, it drafts the plain English summary, and then it sends it to the manager for review before it goes to the team. That is useful. It saves time. It keeps a human in the loop. It turns into a recurring thing that actually helps instead of a recurring headache. That is mindset shift. Stop asking where can we use AI? Start asking which workflows should be better than they are today. That question will lead you to much better projects. It also helps you avoid one of the most common traps, tool thinking first. Tool first thinking sounds like this. We bought this AI tool. What should we use it for? Workflow first thinking sounds like this. This process is costing us time every week. What is the simplest ways to improve it? The second question is much, much healthier. It might still lead to the tool, but it might lead to a simpler automation. It might lead to a better form. It might lead to a checklist. It might lead to a standard operating procedure. It might lead to training. It might lead to a custom system. You do not know until you map the work. This is especially important for small and medium businesses because you cannot afford to chase every AI trend. And many times, small and medium businesses do not have standard operating procedures. So it's very important that you start now because that will help you as you go along. You do not have infinite time and you do not have infinite resources. You do not have a team of researchers testing every new feature. You need practical wins. You need work that saves time, improves follow-up, reduces errors, or helps the team serve customers better. That means your AI strategy should be boring in the best way. Start with work that already matters. Find the friction, find one loop, train the team, measure the result, then repeat. This changes how you should evaluate AI vendors and consultants as well. If someone starts by showing you a tool demo, be careful. The demo may be impressive, but your business is not a demo environment. Ask them about the workflow. Ask them what they need to understand before recommending a solution. Actually, they should be asking you a lot of things around your workflows and around what needs to happen before they even do a demo. What happens when the automation fails? How will the team be trained? How will success be measured? How will the system improve after it launches? Good AI implementation is not just building the thing, it's making sure that the thing fits the business. That is where many of the projects succeed or fail. Here's a simple exercise you can do today. Open a blank page and write down the 5 most annoying recurring workflows in your business. Do not write any AI ideas yet. Write business pain. For example, sales follow-up is inconsistent. Client onboarding depends on too many manual steps. Support questions repeat every week. Reports take too long to prepare. Proposals require too much copying and rewriting. Leads get lost after 2 days every time, right? Now, for each of those questions, then answer these questions. How often does it happen? Who owns it? How much time does it typically take? What tools are involved? What systems you're using right now? Where does a delay happen? Where's the bottleneck? What does a good output look like? What mistakes would matter? Could a human review the output before it goes live? Which one would create the most visible win in the next 2 weeks? That last question is important. Do not start with the project that would be the most impressive at a conference. Start with a project that would make your team say, "Thank goodness, we do not have to do that anymore." That is how adoption starts. People adopt systems that remove pain. They resist systems that feel like extra work with better branding. And if we're honest, a lot of AI adoption right now feels like extra work with better branding. People are told to use AI. They are not given a workflow. They are not given standards. They are not given examples. They are not given permission rules. They are not trained on what good outputs look like. Then, of course, leadership wonders why the usage is inconsistent, why people are not using it. And it's not a people problem. It's a deployment problem. The better approach is to give AI a clear job inside the workflow. For this step, AI drafts. For this step, automation routes. For this step, the human reviews. For this other step, the system logs a result. For this step, we measure whether it worked. That is how you move from random experimentation to operational improvement. This is also where internal AI champions matter. A small business does not always need a full AI department, but it does need a named person who can own improvement process. Someone who understands the workflow. Someone who can gather examples. Someone who can write a clear automation brief. Someone who can test the output. Someone who can train the team. Someone who knows when to ask an expert for help. Without that person, AI stays scattered. With that person, AI becomes a capability. So if you're a founder or an operator listening to this, do not feel behind because you do not have this giant system built yet. The real question is much simpler. Have you identified the first workflow worth improving? Have you mapped it? How do you know how it will work? Do you know who owns it? Do you know what outcome should change? Do you know what AI should be allowed to do and what a human should still approve? If you can answer those questions, you are ahead of many companies that have way more tools but less clarity. And that is the point. AI adoption is moving from access to deployment. The winners will be the companies that can turn AI into real operating improvements. Not someday, not as a giant transformation project, one workflow at a time. So your next step is simple. Before you buy another AI tool, map one workflow. Find the friction. Find the repeated decisions. Find the handoffs. Find the part that depend on memory. Find the output that could be drafted, routed, checked, or summarized. Then decide the smallest useful AI-assisted version of that same process. That is how you close the deployment gap. And if you want help finding where that gap exists in your business, cut our AI automation opportunity map. It asks the same questions we ask on an intro call, but it's directly on our website. You get a custom report with your best automation opportunities, your readiness grade, the risks to watch, and the first 2-week action plan up automatically. It is designed for small and medium businesses that know AI matters, but want a practical starting point. Start there. It's free. Find the workflow, then deploy AI when it can actually create value.